be direct, tell people what they need to do to be successful. Don't hold back, but you can do it in a way that's not disrespectful or degrading, but people need that feedback to also learn how to grow and to recognize their weaknesses.
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. And we believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and as always, I'm here to have conversations and hear stories from real people about real business and real life. My guest today is Kristi Pittman. Kristi is a seasoned human resources executive, currently serving as Vice President of Human Resources for Daikin Comfort Technologies. Her career trajectory with Daikin is truly remarkable. Beginning in 1990 at Goodman Manufacturing, she witnessed firsthand the company's evolution from a modest operation with only 500 employees to the industry giant that it is today, now boasting over 14,000 employees across North America. Kristi's journey encompasses a wide range of HR disciplines, from foundational roles and benefits and payroll to leadership positions, overseeing talent acquisition, organizational development, and total rewards. This breadth of experience provides her with a unique and holistic perspective on the strategic importance of human capital in today's business landscape. Beyond her corporate responsibilities, Kristi is a graduate of the Daikin Executive Program and actively contributes to the community through her involvement with the Centers for Houston Future. Kristi, so nice having you here. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. It's so nice to be here. I'm doing great.
So I like to start every interview with a simple question, and it's always, Kristi, what is your passion and how did you find it?
So my passion, as cliche as it sounds, is really people. And you would hope that your HR leader is going to care about people, right? But for me, it truly is. And I think, growing up Goodman, if you will, I was, just right before my 21st birthday when I started working at Goodman. And I tell folks I was the gopher. So I had the pleasure of running around all over the factory and the company and got to know all the people that I worked with. For years, I did group insurance. So everybody came through me whenever they had a need for their insurance or a health issue, life insurance, things like that. And I think throughout my time with the company, I've just developed a love for not just our people, but, their families and, whether it's new employees, long-term employees, it's what motivates me and keeps me here as long as I've been here.
I mean, I know that sounded cliche, and I even set it up for the episode called People-Centered Strategy. So it'd be a shame if I got a guest that didn't have that answer. So you nailed it. But let's dive into that a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Because people, we are complex, we are many, we are difficult at times. What does it mean to kind of, I guess, put people first or center around people? What does that mean to you?
So I think I could start with that, working for a company like Daikin, where people-centered management is truly a thing, right? There's a lot of companies that say, oh yeah, we believe in people, but Daikin has created a philosophy where people is actually front and center of everything we do. And so I think for me personally, as an HR leader, my role is to make sure everything we're doing in HR helps each employee to reach their infinite potential, whether that's through training programs, whether that's through insurance products that help support their families, whether that's looking at compensation, all aspects of work-life balance. It really is about thinking about people. And, we teach that a lot here at Daikin, that in everything you do, if you think through the lens of the person and not just the action or the activity, you'll have a different outcome and a lot better relationships and collaboration, which then means we'll dig in and work harder and get things done together, at a greater level. And so I think for me personally, in the HR space, really my responsibility is to make sure that our leaders know what their roles are and that they're, doing those actions that really do put people first. And it's not just about the business and making money and selling product or, manufacturing our products. It's about the people's roles and in our responsibility for developing them, throughout their career is what's most important. And the other stuff will come, right? So that's kind of the way we look at it.
How do you address from an HR perspective? I guess, these elements of, I guess, the softer side of putting people first? Because you mentioned a lot about policy. You mentioned a lot about having ways of the company supporting work-life balance, all these things, which I love, absolutely amazing. But there's this other side that I'm always very curious about, especially from HR. What about like the behaviors? What about treatment of others and kindness and these things? How does that show up?
I think there's a couple of things. I think in the first way, it's really about, whenever there's just for example, if there's a disciplinary issue or if you get a leader that says, oh my goodness, this person's just not being successful. They're, not doing what I asked them to do. We always go back to the leader first and say, what have you done to make this person successful? From your communication style to making sure that the objectives are clearly identified, that you've spent time with them, you've recognized their weaknesses, and you've created opportunities to help them overcome that, and so often the leaders will be like, I guess maybe I haven't done all that, right? And so my HR team and even a lot of our top leaders now really embrace that concept of asking, the managers first, what have you done? And whether that's, a first-time disciplinary issue or we're contemplating some kind of termination, those are always the questions that we ask first. Even if there's a policy violation, we go back to, did the individual understand the policy? Did we communicate it in the right way? Did we train them in the right way, to make sure that they had every chance to be successful before they end up here? And I tell you, there are often times we're able to turn those situations around if we reflect inward and think about our part first, which is what Daikin expects us to do, for so many reasons. Because, if you are able to kind of save a person, if you will, from being on the brink of losing their job, and you have humanity in the way that you handle that situation, that's likely going to be your next best employee that's going to want to stay with the company for such a long time, because they recognized you had grace, you had humility, and you had humanity. But you can also be firm. Hey, you're awfully close, but we've got to make sure we don't get ourselves here again. And how do we do that, right? But it's all about how we want to be talked to as human beings, and how are we helping people really understand what their obligations are for Daikin, and in doing so, they'll be successful if they choose to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't help but, as you're explaining all this, I'm thinking about how much I agree with everything you're saying, but then I started thinking about the scale, because you've spent over 34 years with this company, like starting from a much smaller space to where it is now. And when I think of that many humans and that many people and that much emotion and drama,
Mhm,
and with those numbers, you're bound to have all kinds of situations and
mhm.
conflict. I mean, 14,000 employees, you're bound to have a lot of stories. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious, what is it, having been through this growth, how is it, how did you maintain, I guess, the humanity through it all? Because the easy way is to kind of go to process and go through more. I think a
Yeah.
lot of corporations who grow to those sizes rely on these more
Yep.
cold and calculated HR policies, and
Yep.
kind of put business first, because that's more controllable. People are harder to control. So what has been your approach?
So I'm going to reach over and grab a tool, but it starts really at the top, right? So this is our Daikin Group Philosophy booklet. And in this booklet, it talks about people-centered management and really lays out in a very simple way the expectations of both employees and leaders about what it means to exhibit and practice people-centered management. So it starts at the top. And just recently, Daikin celebrated their 100-year anniversary across, the parent companies in Japan. So this is their 100-year anniversary. And we went to Japan in May, and they had their big global managers meeting in addition to the 100-year celebration. And people-centered management and group philosophy were the main topics where they were talking to leaders across the globe. It was so important to them, with a revised document, in line for the anniversary, for us to spend 2 days in groups talking about the document, our interpretation of it, what does it mean, real world examples. And so it's really a mandate from the parent company in Japan. And we're even tracking like all of the activities at our regional levels, what are we doing to get PCM further understood in our business? So I think it starts there with having alignment on the goal. We want everybody to get an understanding. And then once everybody understands, hey, this is our culture, then for us in HR, we've developed programs for different levels of leadership to go through to reinforce the values, reinforce the tenets. It also includes roundtables where we bring in leaders who can share some of these examples. HR is very big part of that, where we share what we think it means for you to be successful as a manager with some of these scenarios. And it's just continuous affirmation of the goal and the expectations. And they're pretty strong for leaders. And we have had leaders where we've had to, I use chastise in a very loose way, but hey, you're just not cutting it as it relates to how you're developing your people. What does that plan look like? And I'll just lastly add, with our HR structure, we have two departments that help reinforce this. So of course, our business partner function, which we have aligned business partners in every region, not just business units, but even underneath business units, the regions, South Division, Central Division, there's an HR dedicated partner that helps with these messages. And then lastly, we have a dedicated employee relations department who hear from the employees when there's issues. And we look at those through a lens of, we're getting a lot of complaints on a manager. Okay, let's go get some education for that leader. Let's figure out what's going on and help them understand, what it means to really lead these departments. And so I think it's those kinds of efforts that really help reinforce this on a company of our size.
Yeah. I'm curious, does people-centered management, is it formally kind of ingrained in your performance evaluations as well?
So that's an interesting question, because we use PCM kind of as a guidepost, but our Japanese parent company has been very clear that they don't want it to be so rigid in the performance management, because everybody practices PCM based upon their personality. You can have these tenets and, okay, go do these things. But if it's not from the heart, if it's not natural, it's just a checklist, it's really not PCM. And so we monitor, through our leadership, interactions, hey, this is one you really should lean into, spend 6 months talking to people about how they exhibit this, this tenet. And so it is something that we continuously reinforce, whether it's posters on the walls, it's short video clips, it's town halls where PCM is always present. It's kind of like safety, right? Hey, we're going to have a safety moment. We do those too, but we also have PCM moments, and we incorporate it as much as we can, but we really try not to make it official kind of counterpoint or a point that we say, hey, you're not doing your PCM very good, we're going to ding you, or we're going to reduce your salary, or increase. It's more of, from the philosophical side, hey, we really feel like you need to dig into this a little bit more, because we're not really seeing those behaviors on some of these actions that you've encountered the last few months. So more coaching and, kind of helping people learn how to do things as it fits their personality. And DIL, our parent company, they'll say, lean into those that you really don't understand or you don't do well, because those would be the ones that you really are going to need the most time with.
Yeah, I think it's much easier to think of these things as like punitive moments of not doing it, but
Yep.
with things of like with treating each other better and things of the heart and things like that tends to work better with positive motivation, or at least getting people to care enough or want to participate. Do you all kind of see it that way as well? And is there anything that you do intentionally to try to get people more bought in, not just kind of seeing the words on the wall, but not living it out?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And it really does start with, we have a couple of really high level premier training programs that are focused on our VPs and directors. It's very intense training for 3 sessions over 8 months. And it's a lot of, just intense learning about what it means to be a leader that exhibits PCM. And then we hold those leaders accountable to their learning. We do have, our Gallup surveys that we can kind of gauge how well somebody's doing. So there's factual data that does, help contribute toward the understanding of an individual's understanding of it. There's one thing I wanted to add though about PCM, is that there's kind of this misnomer that we kind of have to work through, where people think PCM is very, I always say warm and fuzzy, right? Oh, it's all about people. We should all be happy and treat everybody so friendly. But there are elements about PCM that are very paternal, like, but it starts from a place of trust. If you build the trust with the employee, then you can say, hey, I know you had good intentions, but this really didn't turn out the way I'd hoped. What can we do to help, make this better or to move forward? So it does talk about admonish, but in a caring way. Be direct, tell people what they need to do to be successful. Don't hold back, but you can do it in a way that's not disrespectful or degrading, but people need that feedback to also learn how to grow and to recognize their weaknesses. So it's kind of a balance of encouraging and helping people, fulfill their potential. But there's also, a kind of like a father, don't do that because it's going to get you in trouble kind of thing as well.
Absolutely. How do you incorporate people-centered management into the hiring process? I'm curious, how do you find people who will, and I won't just say fit in, but
Yeah.
who will embrace this and make sure that they have, I guess, the qualities that are necessary to practice?
I think that's a really great question. And honestly, it's something we're still tackling from a kind of a larger scale. In the short term, what we've done is we've incorporated some of the right questions in the interview process. We're really looking for folks from a cultural perspective that want to work for a company like Daikin. And, every company is unique. And so I think it's in your hiring manager's best interest to recognize traits within individuals that really want to embrace a culture like this. The Japanese culture sometimes can be somewhat slow in the decision-making process, and you get folks that want a little more autonomy. And so we kind of ask those questions about, hey, this is our environment. This is what the culture is like. Recently, we hired a new CIO, and I spent time with him in my interview, really just talking to him about our culture and, hey, this is the process it takes to get things approved. And it's not a bad thing. It's the way Daikin does things. And let's make sure you're going to be comfortable with this level. And then we talk about PCM. And honestly, the PCM aspect of it is very attractive to most of our candidates, and that we really do, as you will, put our money where our mouth is in terms of how we develop people. And we've got a long way to go, but the intentions are going in the right direction. But I think it's having those right interview questions, getting to the heart of how someone will fit into your culture, not just from a technical or educational perspective, but is this someplace they want to finish their careers? That's the type of people we want to hire and invest in.
One of my favorite sayings it goes like this: honesty without kindness is brutality,
I
but
love that.
but kindness without honesty is manipulation.
I totally agree.
That was my question. Do you agree with that? And how does that play out? Because you mentioned earlier about having those, I guess, those moments and those conversations and those relationships. So I always look for that if that's present, and I'm curious how people achieve that or struggle with that when it comes to this balance of honesty and kindness, because it's in many places it's just kindness. It is just kindness at all costs. So we're not saying the things that need to be said. In other places, there's a little too much. It can be too much honesty in terms of just blunt feedback with no care for how it comes across. How do you balance those things?
I think it's a great question. And I think it's things that we still have to work on all the time, right? Because we're not perfect and situations will arise where people get really, whether it's really passionate or people are frustrated or, something's not going right. And it comes with practice, knowing that that's the expectation. And if you look at Daikin's core values, one of their core values is harmonious personal relationships. The value of building the relationships, from the very beginning. And our CIO, for example, so one of the first pieces of advice I gave him was, as soon as you get on boots on the ground, these are the 10 people you need to go meet, and you need to start building those relationships with them. When you do that, you come from a place of trust. Once you have that place of trust, you can have vigorous discussions and you can do it in a respectful way. PCM is not about not having those discussions, and you need to be direct if that's what we need to solve the problem, because we still need to get results within the company. It's not just about having a great place to work if we're not meeting the results. And so I think it really does come with the education and the emphasis on the relationships. And once you go build those, and I can say that throughout my whole career, what's made me successful is building relationships with not just who the people I think are going to help me come up in my career, but everybody, and getting to know everybody and building those relationships and creating that trust that people know who you are. They can trust to come and have a conversation with you. And if you have to say something harsh, you can do it in a kind way, but it doesn't stop you from being able to have that discussion. And so I think that's the root of it all, is really building those relationships in a space of trust.
Beautiful. Couldn't agree more. I have a hypothetical.
Okay.
If you have a leader or a manager who is, I'll paint them as like almost comically kind of stereotypical, kind of very loud, very demanding, a little demeaning. Again, hypothetical, but you have this person who's getting things done, very effective, but kind of leaving a lot of dead bodies in their trail, like this type of classic trope. What about your approach is different in how you're going to handle this person, or where do you start?
So I always start with a conversation, pull them in my office, and then it's facts, right? Let me share with you the dozen complaints I've received this week because of your style, or, I'm hearing that people are really, demotivated and turned off by how you're approaching things in a meeting. Can we talk about that? Right. And, and then it really does come down to like, what is their response? If it's negative and it's just, you don't know what you're talking about, and I've got to be this way to get things done, then there's, I will go back to PCM. You recognize you're in a culture that does not really reward that type of behavior, right? And it does come down to, no matter what level you are, if you're acting in a way that is not representative of a Daikin executive, you're not special and you're not like above, reproach. And if those tactics and don't work, then sometimes I'll engage a peer. Hey, can you have a conversation from your perspective with this person and see if you can help me kind of turn them around? And then if that doesn't work, then I go to the CEO. But even that is not you need to fire this person. It's, hey, I've had a couple of conversations. I'm getting a few complaints. I've tried to go this approach. Can you have a conversation, or together, can we have a conversation? And usually that gets it done, because at that point they recognize the seriousness of the discussion, but we don't hold back. You can have, even with the top executives, you can have very, harsh discussions, but in a very kind way, but also very direct, where they recognize, hey, I don't want to kind of throw the HR card at you, but, we need to have a serious discussion here. So in the worst case scenario, if people are leaving, then I always say I go green and I pull out the data. Here's the 20 people who have left your organization this month. Is this the trend that you want to be responsible for? So I think those are just some ways that, we can manage it in this culture.
Awesome. Last piece I want to touch on is kind of just closing the loop on all this, because what I learned today is that while you have a handbook and you have all these great, really cemented from the top down kind of approaches to people and people-centered management, like you mentioned, it's still at the end of the day all about relationships and making sure that you can build that trust. How does that shape what would you consider HR for you and the HR department at Daikin unique and different because of that? Is relationships a bigger part of your job, or why not? I'm curious to see that element kind of as it shows up in your work.
So I think that's a great question. And having been here 34 years, it's hard for me to speak about what other HR departments are doing, right? But I can tell you, for me personally, even as I've grown in my career, I've always said I want to be that same person that I was 30 years ago with just a bigger job, right? I want to be approachable. I want people to feel like if they come to me or they come to HR, we're going to be here for them. We're going to help them. And people still come to me because they've known me for so long, and I redirect them to a reliable source that's going to help them, because that's what we're supposed to do. And I can tell you that the best part about the relationship building is the trust that it gets across the aisle. So, in hard times, if they're hearing a message from me, oh, well, Kristi said it. And it's not about Kristi. It's just that I'm the person that they know. And it's like, okay, we can trust that she's not going to lie to us. She's not going to tell us, anything that's not true. And we can trust that whatever the message is, she's thought about the impact to us, because that's what I do. And it's what I've always done. And then within my own HR team, we're a very collaborative team. And I feel like we've got such a great opportunity to hear all of our voices with all of our like directors and COEs, that everybody's got an opportunity to give their opinion, because their opinions are valuable. They're in the trenches, they see what's going on every day, and they could be the person that brings a solution that I'm not seeing because I'm not in those places anymore. So I think when you think about the importance of relationships within HR, I think it's the number one thing that an HR department has to have. It's the trust of the individuals, that they know you're looking out for their best interest, and they can trust that you're going to think about them, even if we have to make hard decisions as a company.
Beautiful. Kristi, can't thank you enough for joining me
Oh,
today.
thank
I had
you.
such a good conversation, and
You too.
many other questions, but as I've mentioned to listeners before, I am slowly reducing my episode length time, as science has shown that people want shorter episodes. So if that's not that's not true, somebody email me, let me know that you want longer episodes, and I'll do it.
Well,
But
thank you.
in the meantime, Kristi, again, thank you so much, and it's been very insightful. I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate the time that you took today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to join you in your group today.
Awesome. To the listeners, thank you so much. As always, we appreciate it. If you haven't checked out the book, Love is a Business Strategy, still out there. Check it out. Subscribe and rate the podcast. We appreciate all of it. And with that, we'll be signing off, and we'll be seeing you in 2 weeks. See you, everybody.